Welcome back to EPSN. I'm your host, Jacob Schmidt, bringing you your Week 3 recap. Now, the air is changing in the NBA. No longer do the coaches approach each new week with that little kid on Christmas sense of excitement. But now, the coaches realize the weight each week brings and feel the impact it may have on their playoff hopes. The grind has begun, and it's no longer just about winning, but about preserving differential, calculating every possible situation, scrimming behind the scenes, and grinding out every last game to the bitter end. Although it's this pressure that causes some teams to crumble, make mistakes, or underprepare, as we've definitely saw this week. Let's dive in as these teams dredge on. With teams hesitant to start their battles this week, taking every last minute possible to prep and to plan, it's no surprise that we see two seasoned veterans that started their coaching in the Bellwork Battle Association back in the 2010s take the stage in the first match of the week. The Dayton Dragonites took on the Chicago Snibbles Thursday night. The Snibbles had the type advantage to lead off the match, but the Dragonites, knowing the value of entry hazards, were still able to get up a layer of spikes with Focus Sash Frostlass, and then played it safe early. We did see a creative Endure set on Heracross get revealed by the Snibbles, but the Dragonites were able to play around it and pick up the early lead. Snibbles made some nice plays and switches to get back into this game until RNG struck. Dayton got a nice scald burn with Raiku on Sandslash, preventing what could have been a knockout from that Sandslash. And now, Scarf Drapion and Bulky Vaporeon were able to bring the Snibbles back into this game and tie it up at fours until the Dragonites do what they've done all season, and they ring that Liberty Bell. The all-star support from Bronzong and Trick Room and a nice explosion set up Hariyama to continue putting the pain in MVP campaign. The Snibbles pushed the Dragonites harder than they've been pushed all season, but in the end, the Dragonites win 4-0. Game 2, we had 100 Thievals versus the Buffalo Rills. And 100T might as well stood for 100 techs. There were excellent techs and switches from the 100 Thievals. They switched around, which allowed them to play around difficult mons like from Buffalo, like Gastrodon and Rotom-Mow. And while the techs with Giga Drain on Xatu, Psychic on Shaman, Brick Break on Weavile were able to scare off what would be mons switching into them. You can't bring in Infernape or Crobat to counter Shaman when it's just continually throwing off Psychic. You can't bring in T-Tar on Weavile when he's just continually pressing Brick Break. We also got to see some really great Polywrath play, where it just hits way harder than it should and has so much more longevity than I would expect, and may be the MVP for 100 Thievals at this point in the season. I'm loving what I'm seeing, and all these things end up giving 100T the 5-0 win. Game 3, we had the Detroit Suicunes against Texas A&M. And I don't know if Texas had ever gone noodling before, but they were in over their heads. Early on, I thought both teams played it really well. I appreciated both teams' priority for getting up early hazards from both, and we also got to see a couple fun sets like Sing Blissey and then Dragon Dance Wish Cash. And speaking of Wish Cash, it's 6-0 this week. Detroit made a great play getting it in on Fortress that just could not touch it. And unfortunately, this was a case where Texas's desire to get up entry hazards actually hurt them. Now, Wish Cash is known to be kind of a one-trick pony, and as soon as I saw it, at least, I was expecting Dragon Dance. But it was ended up being able to get up 2 Dragon Dances on Texas due to spikes, due to Texas desiring to get up those spikes. And I think they played it well. They ended up sacking off a mon that they didn't need, and then brought one in that could potentially one-hit KO Wish Cash in return. But thanks to an unfortunate flinch on that Latios, Wish Cash was able to two-shot it and remain unharmed. And while there still might have been plays to get around it at this point, I think it was too late, and Detroit ends up winning 6-0. Game 4, we had Rutgers Corviknight against the Washington Chespins. In this game, Washington says night-night. Now, this game felt long to watch. It did go 46 turns, which is a relatively long match, but this felt like an 80-turner or more. And honestly, not always in a good way. And that's possibly because it just consisted of just the fattest Yuxi set sitting on the field, just pressing Yan. And Yuxi was on the field for 28 of 46 turns. It wasn't even the only mon with Yan this game either. Swampert had Rest, Sleep Talk, and Yan on it. 3 out of his 4 moves had to do with sleep. And so this game just kind of felt tiring. And really, I'm exaggerating. It really wasn't so bad to watch. I think the worst part was, honestly, we got to see what could have been 2 really cool sets not work out. We got to see Belly Drum Charizard, which missed a Rock Slide and then died. And then we got to see Custap Berry Mamoswine, which used its Custap Berry while it was asleep, so we didn't even see what it was trying to use. And in the end, the Washington Uxies, the Washington Chespins win 4-0. Game 5 was the Seattle Sonics against Atlanta Dream Eaters, and Atlanta had a rocky week 3. I felt like Seattle had this one from turn 1. It looked like both teams wanted to get up rocks early, but then Atlanta switched out while Seattle was able to get up their rocks. And then Atlanta was in favor then of getting up a light screen instead of entry hazards. And this kind of gave away that offensive momentum they gained turn 1 from switching out and allowed Seattle to catch back up in momentum. And then it was just both teams playing it safe, doing a lot of switching, making plays that favored the team who didn't have entry hazards up, who was not taking damage every time they switched in. And so by turn 11, due to all this switching and safe playing back and forth, the rocks that were set up by Seattle were able to do 125% of damage to a Pokemon's health in total. And while turn 11, Atlanta was able to defog away these rocks, still 3 turns later, Seattle does a great job getting rocks back up, doing another 75% in damage to Atlanta once again. That's a total of 200 collective damage spread out across the team, 200%. And out of the 600% total on a team, that's essentially 2 KOs. And this just shows the stat line doesn't always show the value of a Pokemon, because that's essentially 2 KOs that it could have had. And this spread damage then allowed bonds like Quagsire to shine this week and pick up 3 knockouts in this 6-0 victory for Seattle. Game 6, we had the Pittsburgh Piratas against Cincy Raiku. And this game brought back nightmares. If you've ever played against Whitney's Miltank, you know what I'm talking about. It looked like Whitney's Miltank out there, but on steroids. Early on in this match, we got to see a couple really cool sets like Ancient Power Articuno, trying to hit an expected Arcanine switch in, and then the tried and true classic with Calm Mind Suicune, which ended up being Cincy's downfall. Because we saw Psych Up Curse Miltank, and it worked. This just shows great prep from Pittsburgh, as Cincy, who has brought Calm Mind Suicune in the previous 2 weeks, allowed Miltank then to match these special boosts from Suicune. And from there, it was just about over. Cincy got close to knocking out Miltank, and I think their best bet would have been to just keep spamming Scald with Suicune, as it had more PP than Milk Drink, and so it could have just kept doing that longer. Or maybe risk another Calm Mind just to put more pressure. But hindsight is 2020. Miltank and Rotom Washington, Miltank and Pittsburgh Piratas, not used to that one still, end up rolling on to that 6-0 victory. Game 7, we had Miami Gulpins against the Rotom Washington team, and this was the game of almost 6-0s from either team, but neither one just quite getting it. Game 7, we saw another week of Rotom Washington just playing slow, methodical Pokemon, even against this really dangerous and good and creative Gulpins team. Both teams played well. They prioritized getting rocks on their opponent, removing them from their own side. We saw an awesome, dangerous Celebi Swords Dance set, but ends up getting taken by surprise due to that Scarfed Pinsir. And now was the Swords Dance Celebi hoping to pass that? 3 times attack boost to Lucario or to Entei for a quick 6-0 sweep? I don't know. But Pinsir is the reason that Miami doesn't get the chance for that potential 6-0. And we'll get back to that later, because the rest of the game was a slow grind from Rotom Washington, using that solid Regenerator core with a really fat Blissey and reliable hazard removal to just methodically wear down the Gulpins until, you guessed it, Scarfed Moxie Pinsir starts to clean up. But well-played priority moves like Ice Shard Glaceon, E-Speed Entei prevent this Pinsir from getting that 6-0, and that's right, Pinsir gets knocked out and is once again the reason there was no 6-0 this time instead for Rotom Washington. However, they do still go on to get that 5-0 win. Game 8, we had the Jersey City Juicers against the Miami Heatran, and this game was a slugfest. If you like Pokemon for awesome moves like Blizzard, Thunderbolt, Earthquake, Flamethrower, this is the game for you. But honestly, I was not entirely sure what was happening all the time in this game. We definitely saw cool sets like Trick Room Starmie and a really unique Weezing set, but we really didn't see much defense from either team, and saw some confusing plays from both sides. When I thought a team had a confirmed KO, they switched out. Or when I thought Amon had the type advantage, it switched out. I'd have loved to see all the sets from each of these teams, because I've rewatched this several times now, and I'm still just not entirely sure what was happening or the thought process behind some moves. And at the end of the day, this game was super exciting. It was just Mons throwing out punches, getting punched back. But in the end, Snorlax just natural bulk, the little bit of defense that we kind of got to see in this game, the special defense from Snorlax, allowed Jersey City to stay in it and get that 1-0 victory. Game 9, we had San Jose Sharpedos against the Rutgers Corviknights. And in the end, bulky offense just does it. This was a solid game from both teams. San Jose brought a dangerous Sun team and made some pretty smart plays, like switching out turn 1 and not risking Ninetales going up against a Heatran that might have been set up to live a fire move and knock it out in return. So I like the safe play and the caution there because Ninetales was key for this team. Being able to set up the Sun was key. They didn't want to lose that right away. But the Rutgers played really well this week with their bulky offensive team. They were able to take hits, especially super effective hits, like when we see Swampert living on a solar beam and then knocking out Ninetales in return. It kind of felt like GG at that point. San Jose did have a chance to get back in it with Shiftry, but they ended up missing a rock slide that prevented that from happening. And although both teams had some really cool sets, that strong special Metagross, the Flame Orb, Trick, Hex, Rotom, in the end, some really well prepared sets gives Rutgers the 4-0 victory. Game 10, we had the Doom Blue Devils against the Washington Chespins, and crucial misses cost the Chespins this game. Now, the title says it all, or at least most of the story. The game started off pretty as a slow, methodical game, both coaches making safe plays, getting a feel for each other, but I really loved the Empoleon play from Doom. They got great value out of it early with Yawn and Roar, forcing switches onto its own stealth rocks. I like how both teams brought solid rock setters and removal. Other cool sets were brought, like Rain Dance Ludicolo, Agility Porygon Z. However, two crucial misses really hurt the Chespins. They missed a high jump kick on Lopunny, causing it to knock itself out. They missed a Hydro Pump on Ludicolo, causing it to miss a KO on Magneton. And while these misses hurt the Chespins, I don't think it was the sole reason for their loss. I think there was just some great play, like especially that Empoleon play from Doom that pushed them ahead. And appreciated that boost to differential due to those misses and take that 5-0 win. Then finally, Game 11. That's right, we had extra free Pokemon this week. We had the New Haven Nocturne against the New Orleans Shinx. And this game showed that Scarfed Crab is daunting. And this was maybe my favorite game to watch this week. I don't feel like there were any big misplays or moves that I questioned or would have done differently. I thought New Haven started out with some early momentum, making some great reads with Electabuzz and Cacturne, hitting for just a ton of damage. Then a really funky Mew set came in with what was bulky and with Roost and Nasty Plot and Ice Beam. And it allowed New Orleans to actually catch up in momentum and then get the first KO. They living a Cacturne Dark Pulse and then knocking it out in return. And despite a couple of paras, New Orleans was able to keep the momentum as they get their real threat, Scarf Crawdont, in on Gliscor, and then surprise kill it with Crabhammer. And then also pick up a KO on the Electabuzz the next mon in because it outsped because it was Scarfed. And at this point in the game, New Haven really had no mon faster than the Lobster. But they did manage to pick up 2 KOs before Crawdont was able to come back in and finish off their last 3 mons. So overall, this was a much closer game than that 4-0 victory showed for New Orleans. There were no large misplays from either team, in my opinion. It was a great game from 2 scary teams to finish out this week, as New Orleans does then improve to 3-0. And that's all we have this week for your NBA recaps. We'll see you next week after week 4.